So in this video, we're going to talk about solopreneurship. And basically, I did the whole solopreneurship thing for only around a year. So I don't want it to seem like I'm an expert on this, but I have some thoughts. And so I'm going to break down the 6 reasons why I do not want to be a solopreneur. And then I'll also kind of give you the model I am trying to build, because if you're thinking I'm going to suggest, hey, build a massive team and scale to the moon and that sort of stuff, it's not going to be that either. So stay tuned to the end so you can kind of see what I'm building. Again, I'm building it as we go. So it's not one of those things where I'm going to say I'm an expert on this just yet, but having done the scale the agency thing and having done the solopreneur thing, this is kind of a happy medium. So if you don't know who the hell I am or why you should listen to me, my name is Colby. Like I said, scaled an agency to multi-7 figures over the course of 9 years, burnt out really bad in year 7, twice in the same year, and then got it down to, a much more manageable working schedule, but we still had all these employees and that sort of stuff. And off the back of that, I went into solopreneurship and realized that there's a lot of stuff going on there. So I'm actually going to break down the 6 things, like the 6 reasons I don't want to do it anymore. And we can dive into that. So when it comes down to it, the first one is solopreneurship is lonely as hell. Like, I'm not talking about, hey, solopreneurship is only lonely if you don't have like a network or you're sitting in your, basement, whatever. I'm sitting in my basement right now, laptop and all that sort of stuff. And you're just writing, trying to build a business to get to 10K, 20K, 50K, whatever. It's lonely as hell because there is just something about having this kind of group mentality, this tribal mentality where you're rowing in the same direction as other people who are working towards the same mission. The reality is even if you do have a good network, those people have their own businesses, right? Or they're working elsewhere. And so you're not actually rowing in the same direction towards that unique mission that you and your team have, right? So it kind of leans into really the next one is that because you don't have a team, you're low leverage, right? When it comes down to it is building a business should be fun. I don't know the stats exactly, but something like 90% of businesses are out of business within like 5 to 10 years, something like that. And so objectively, like, why would you sign up for something that fails like 9 out of 10 times unless you really, really care about it, right? And one of the easiest ways to start despising this thing, even if you have an amazing idea to build a business around, is doing everything, right? If you're doing all the marketing, all the sales, all the admin, all the operations, you're low leverage because you're distracted. There's this graphic, maybe I can throw it up here from the book Essentialism, where there's 2 circles, right? And energy is in both of these circles. And in one of the circles, there is just one arrow pointing up, going a long way, right? A single arrow. But in the other circle, the one that is basically highlights this is energy's in the middle and you have a bunch of tiny arrows pointing out in all different directions. And that's like the default mode for a solopreneur, right? Is, hey, one of those arrows is admin. One of those arrows is posting content. Oh shit, I forgot to send that invoice, like all that kind of stuff, right? And so you are inherently low leverage because there is no one else to do it. Even if you get good at automating and delegating to, some sort of AI or whatever, you still have to manage those things. You have to check on those numbers or you have to make sure they're working properly. And so it is just not, even in the world of AI, you should have a complete pulse on everything in the business, but to be so ingrained and like in the minutia of every bit of the business is not required anymore. And again, it's a really good way to start despising the business of an idea you actually love, simply because in many ways you're too afraid to like spend a bit of money to not do low leverage shit. Okay. So third one is it's kind of like a vacuum. And this is probably one of the actually biggest ones for me in terms of why I don't like solopreneurship, because it seems really glamorous, right? Like the ability to build a high 6-figure, 7-figure business, just you, sounds freaking awesome, right? And in so many ways, there are going to be people out there who can do that and would advocate opposite of what I'm saying right now, because they build like digital product businesses and that sort of stuff, right? Where they build something once and they're super high leverage. I've always been in the service business, like one-on-one helping clients and that sort of stuff. And so that's not me. But the reason I don't like solopreneurship on the, like, it's a vacuum side of things, is all directions come from you, right? What I mean by that is like, to have a big idea, that has to come from you. To be inspired, that has to come from you. To schedule something, that has to come from you. To fulfill something, that has to come from you. And it's just like all of this like doing instead of actually like having time to think. And that's kind of the fourth one, is what I call self-defeat, right? Is like, if you are constantly, because you're doing everything and you're going to be an ambitious person, again, you wouldn't start a business where 9 out of 10 of them fail unless you were an ambitious person and wanted to impact the world and like see this work. Like, I don't think anyone's starting a business being like, I can't wait till this fails. But you are, when you're doing all of this stuff, there is no one to like checks and balances you. You are basically, 100% like, oh, I'm being left behind. Like, just by nature of you having to do so much stuff, you're like, I'm being left behind right now. I'm not moving as fast as I want. And here's the problem with social media, and I do this too. And I'm really working on rewiring my mind with this. In fact, I even thought about just like not following anybody on social media, but I'm trying to have a world where I can do both. Is like, I'll look at somebody younger than me. I'm 35 right now, and I'll see like a 25-year-old who's hitting 7 figures. And yeah, of course, it's the internet. And so chances are that they don't have this amazing lifestyle that they're portraying online, but to have those dollar amounts and stuff, I look at that and be like, man, I'm so far behind. But you understand, this objectively, that your journey is going to be different, right? You have to go through the things you go through to be able to appreciate what you have, be grateful for what you have, build what you can, like all those sorts of things. But I feel like when no one's watching you, when you're in the shadows of solopreneurship and there's no one to be like, hey, we're on track, or I believe in you, or whatever, or you don't have someone to row in the same direction as you, you're just like, you're filling your mind with so much of this self-defeating talk of like, I'm behind, I'm not doing it, I need to say yes more, I need to send more DMs, I need to get on more sales calls, whatever it is, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with any of those things. But if you're doing them from like a reactive mode, there's no one to like stop you and say, hey, I really like what we're doing, or just to even have a different perspective. You could still feel like shit, but just not be the only person speaking to yourself, right? To have other people who are working towards the mission like you, to kind of snap you out of this like reality you're trying to create for yourself in your mind, right? So the fifth one I would say is like a consistency deficit, or on the flip side, an over optimization. So what do I mean by this? Basically, when you're stuck, again, all of this is kind of related to doing. Like, if there's no one else to do it and you still have to monitor all the automations or whatever, even if you know what you're doing, is you're going to really struggle with consistency. Because say you're like in the state of flow, which is really hard for you to find when you're a solopreneur, right? Because you're trying to hit the numbers, you're trying to feed your family, whatever. But like, say you're actually in a state of flow, you had the coffee hit perfectly, you go to a coffee shop and you're like, boom, I want to write, I want to write, I want to write. Or I want to create content, or I want to like build deliverables, whatever it is, something that lights you up, right? And then something will happen that will pull your focus. And so you can't be in flow anymore. And you have to go handle that fire. Like, you forgot to send an invoice, or your client's website went down, or whatever it is. And now the consistency thing is completely thrown over apple cart style, because you have to make sure you get fed, right? Whereas if you had someone who could basically handle those things for you, you wouldn't have to worry about that as much. And the other side is like over optimizing, right? Is when you're so focused on like, I need to, not I get to. You're in the I have to mode. I have to be consistent online. I have to post every day, whatever it may be. Now you're just have this consistency, but no purpose. You over optimize. And a really good example of this is like having a content cadence or a calendar that you like do not divert from whatsoever. There's value in being consistent. Yes, you need to build the skills, but if you're doing it just because of the content calendar, instead of doing it because you actually believe in what you're saying, or you're creating value, you're speaking to one type of person, whatever it is, obligation. And in that case, the actual content cadence is the master, not the value you're trying to give, right? And so we get all into this like self-improvement, get 1% better every day bullshit, which, there's an element of truth to it. Of course, I subscribe to it, but getting 1% better every day doesn't mean I just do this regardless, whether I think it's good or not, right? And to have you get to a point where you can actually produce things for your clients, for the business, for your content, whatever it is, where the only criteria for you is, am I creating this from a place of get to versus have to, you realize that content cadences mean very, very little. Like one of my favorite people who I follow, a mentor of mine, he posts like a couple times a week, right? And he is absolutely crushing it. So there's no direct through line through I post every single day that I make more money. It's not unhelpful, but it is not, that's not going to be the thing that makes you a millionaire. Okay. And finally, this is a big one. This is one I'm coming to. Number 6 for me is like when you're a solopreneur, again, all going down to the foundation stone, if you're just doing so much that you don't really have time to slow down. But I've learned just in the last handful of months is the more time I have to think, the better my business feels. And it's still early days, but it's starting to perform better as well. When I put more of my time into my big ideas, my values, my beliefs, instead of what's trending, what is the model that works, like everything works, right? The more time I think of what do I care about? What are my values? What are my kind of controversial opinions compared to what's out there? The more resonance I'm building for my brand, the more people come into my sphere and say, I like that, tell me more. And so sidebar, if you are interested in like kind of learning your big ideas and that sort of stuff, I created a custom GPT. I call it the Big Idea Vault. And it is like an absolute banger in terms of asking specific questions one by one to actually extract the big ideas for you. Totally free. See it in the description below. So in short, like the more you can build and think, like I'm gonna go walk my dog right after this. I'm gonna no headphones, just walk and enjoy it and just be like, what's my next move? What do I want to actually produce? All that sort of stuff. Instead of getting stuck in like, oh, I have to do this and that and that and this, it's just too much. Right. The more time you spend thinking, the better stuff you'll do. And you'll realize I can do less and still make more money. All right. So now let's transition into the business model I'm working on. Like I said, I am just getting this under my belt, having done the agency thing for a decade and being like, I don't really like this anymore. And then doing the solopreneur thing for about a year and being like, that still doesn't feel right. What I'm going to outline here is just like what feels most right now. So if you're watching this video, it's 2025. If you watch it in 2028 and I've changed my mind, then that's fine. People change, right? But I call it the U+2, and it is basically you, a virtual assistant, and someone to help you with content. Ideally, like a creative director or someone who can at least schedule your content for you. Or if you're really big into video, I would say someone who is like has way better editing skills than you do, something like that. But the first thing that a lot of people would think is like, well, I can't hire anybody. That's wicked expensive. I'm not at that stage for my business. I'm only making 5 to 10K a month or whatever it is. And I just want to give my 2 cents on that is that I hired a VA before my business was making any money. And the reason for it was I had done all the low leverage things at the agency before. And then as I delegated them out, I made more money, right? And so it is kind of this short term where it's like, yeah, okay, I'll pay a little bit to spend more of my time thinking strategically, creating content, being in my zone of genius, doing things I like so I'm not actually successful and then want to burn it down later. I have something that gives me energy, feels light and is fun, right? A VA is one of the best ways to go about that. It is not that hard to find an amazing VA. You just need to have a really good kind of interview process and all that sort of stuff. So I'll include mine in the description below as well. Feel free to check that out if you're thinking about hiring a VA. But I want to dispel the idea of if you are, say, below 10K months, that you can't afford one right now. You absolutely can, because the difference is not in terms of actual price and cost. It is in terms of leverage and value, right? So you do not need to go from I don't have a VA to I hire a VA for 40 hours a week. When I started, I got my first VA working between 5 and 10 hours a week. I'm pretty flexible with my staff. I'm like, hey, just do the work. If you can do it in 2 hours, great. You don't need to work the rest. I'll pay you the same, right? What matters is that it gets done. And so what's really, I just want to be abundantly clear. Like, if you are just starting out, you can afford a VA. If you're established, you can afford a VA. Like, I started my VA in the Philippines, and I caught a lot of flack for this, actually. She's amazing. She's still with me to this day. But she negotiated a pretty reasonable salary for Philippines, and it seems absurdly low for us Americans. Now, my goal, of course, is to pay a living wage on an American standard to my team. But right now, my VA, who negotiated the salary, was only costing me at the start for 10 hours was like $100 a week, right? And she negotiated that. Now she's with me full time, and it's amazing. And I've since given her a ton of raises, and it's still crazy low, right? But that's because my business is 5 months old as I record this. And so to get to where I need it to be, she will get there. She stays with me for the long term. Meanwhile, she's living in the top 10% in the Philippines right now, right? So the whole point of that is, like, for if you got a VA and a content editor, and again, you can see how I go about trying to hire these people and all that sort of stuff. So you find amazing people, because I've heard horror stories with VAs. I personally haven't had any horror stories with VAs, but I think it's down to like the interviewing and how discerning and selective I am at the beginning. I'm not just saying yes to someone who's enthusiastic. I'm making sure they're like gonna fit the role. But someone like that, say 5 hours a week to 10 hours a week, and an editor, or someone helping you with video or whatever, they're going to be a little bit more expensive than a generalist VA. But all told, we're talking, like, to start for part-time, $800 to $1,500 a month, depending on what you want to spend. And what that buys you is hours and hours and hours back. So let's say we do 10 hours for a generalist and 10 hours for an editor. That's 20 hours of my time back, which I'm not good at editing videos anyway. And so it's actually a higher quality product that, yeah, I spent like $1,000 a month for, but I am worth way more than whatever that is hourly, right? Like, let me actually do the math. Public school education. So I'm worth way more than $50 an hour if I can be in my zone of genius, right? Just for someone to have a 30-minute phone call with me is $250. And so it's one of those things where it's like, if I can delegate that out, do I want to spend $1,000 right now? No, I know you don't want to spend $1,000 right now. But if that $1,000 gets you 20 hours back and you're able to create a superior product because of it, it's a no freaking brainer. And so, to circle all back on the solopreneur thing, that's what we're talking about, whether it's 10 hours, 20 hours, even 5 hours, where you're in your zone of genius instead of pulled in a million different directions. That is massive. And I don't think people understand how big of a momentum machine this is, right? So I want to end the video there, because I think this is one of those things that is so self-explanatory once you actually consider it. I can understand that it would be difficult for, if you've never hired a VA before, if you've never even managed people before, it can feel like this whole can of worms. You do want to be able to manage them, and there's a whole bunch of actual techniques and stuff to make sure you do it well. But it really comes down to finding the right person. And so check out the resource below on how I go about hiring VAs. And like I said, I've had mine for over a year now. She's amazing, and has made my life so much better. In fact, she actually just booked a vacation for me and my wife that we just got back from as I record this, where we were out in the middle of nowhere in a cabin with no Wi-Fi and cell service for 5 days. She found that for me. All I had to do was book and pay for it. And it was an amazing 5 days where I have so much energy now, right? So that is just a sidebar to be like, they can do whatever you want. But I'm going to end it there. So being a solopreneur, it's lonely as hell. Everything's on you. You're constantly pulling a million different directions, and then scaling this massive business to 4, 5, 10 employees, whatever. It's not where it's at, right? I cannot recommend enough simplifying, but simplifying doesn't mean you do everything. In fact, solopreneurship is a really complex game because there's no one else to help you. So with that, we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and you're still here, feel free to like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing more of these things just kind of off the cuff with my general values and beliefs. But yeah, check out those resources. Check out the Big Idea Vault GPT. Check out the hiring. and we will see you in the next one.